It is 11:47 p.m. The Arabian Sea, 190 nautical miles due south of the Strait of Hormuz, in a patch of ocean where the water runs 2,800 meters deep, and the surface at this hour is the color of polished obsidian, black, flat, and reflecting nothing but the faintest smear of overcast sky. There is no moon. Cloud cover at 8,000 feet blocks what starlight might otherwise have reached the water. Visibility at the surface is approximately 2 nautical miles by eye. The wind is negligible, less than 6 knots from the east. The sea state is barely 1. It is the kind of night that tacticians describe as ideal for small craft operations. Low visibility, calm water, minimal acoustic signature from wave action to mask the sounds of approach. The people who chose this night for what is about to happen chose it deliberately because they have studied the conditions that favor their weapons and they scheduled their operation around them. USS Carl Vinson, CVN-70, is operating in a modified figure-8 pattern at the center of her strike group, conducting night flight operations. 2 FA-18Fs are on the CADs. The flight deck is lit with the controlled, organized illumination of a carrier conducting real work. Red lights, amber lights, the moving wands of the aircraft directors. From the air, the carrier looks like a city street at midnight. From the surface, in the darkness surrounding her, she is the brightest thing within 50 miles. That brightness is operationally necessary and tactically uncomfortable in equal measure. You cannot conduct night flight operations in darkness. The darkness does not protect you when you are the only light source visible for 50 miles. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has been studying this problem. The problem of attacking a carrier at night during flight operations for 11 years. They have studied it with the particular intensity that comes from an institution that has been told by its political leadership that the destruction of an American aircraft carrier represents the single most consequential military achievement available to the Iranian state. Carrier killing is not a sideline for the IRGCN. It is the organizing principle of their procurement decisions, their training programs, their doctrinal development. And in 2021, they acquired a weapon that their planners assessed as the most promising candidate they had ever evaluated for the mission. The weapon is the Shahed 191 derived autonomous surface vehicle, a kamikaze drone boat built on a fiberglass hull approximately 4 meters in length, powered by a diesel engine capable of sustaining 35 knots in sea state, 2 or below, carrying a shaped charge warhead of approximately 40 kilograms of high explosive in the bow, and guided by a combination of GPS navigation, optical terminal seeker, and a data link that allows a remote operator to make course corrections up to the moment of impact. The Iranians call their version the Toofan, the Storm. Western intelligence designates it ERGCN-USV-01. By any name, it is a weapon that takes the concept of the suicide boat, as old as the Second World War, as contemporary as the Houthi operations against Red Sea shipping that the world watched with considerable alarm, and applies modern electronics, GPS precision, and mass production economics to create something that costs approximately $30,000 per unit and can, if it reaches its target, deliver enough energy to the hull of a warship to cause catastrophic flooding in the spaces it strikes. $30,000. That is the unit cost of the threat that USS Carl Vinson's defensive systems are about to be asked to address. For context, a single SM 2 Block 3B surface-to-air missile. The weapon optimized for airborne threats costs approximately $400,000. A rolling airframe missile costs approximately $900,000. The Phalanx CIWS round costs approximately $30 per projectile, which sounds cheap until you calculate the 4,500 rounds per minute consumption rate and recognize that sustained Phalanx employment is a logistics problem that the Navy has spent considerable effort managing. The economics of drone boat warfare favor the attacker in a way that makes operational planners genuinely uncomfortable because they can scale. One drone boat is a nuisance. 10 drone boats, arriving simultaneously from different vectors, begin to stress a defensive system's engagement capacity. 30 drone boats, properly coordinated, properly timed, approaching from sectors that complicate the geometry of a strike group's defensive coverage. That is a problem that requires serious thought and serious preparation. The IRGCN has deployed 31 Toofan drone boats tonight. They launched from 3 positions: a modified dhow operating without lights 140 nautical miles southwest of the carrier's current position, which deployed 12 drones at 10:53 p.m. A second dhow 110 nautical miles to the southeast, which deployed 11 drones at 11:02 p.m. and a coastal launch facility near Jask, Iran, 190 nautical miles to the north-northeast, which deployed 8 drones via a ramp system into the water at 11:14 p.m. The drones from all 3 positions were programmed with the carrier's last confirmed position, derived from commercial satellite imagery acquired at 6:47 p.m. and instructed to converge on that position at a time calculated to produce simultaneous arrival from 3 different vectors. 31 weapons, 3 approach axes, 1 target. On paper, it is the most ambitious IRGCN surface attack operation ever planned. The timing, the multi-axis geometry, the mass, all of it reflects years of doctrinal development and a genuine attempt to overwhelm the defensive capacity of a carrier strike group through coordinated saturation. The planners who designed this operation are not amateurs. They understand layered defense. They understand that a carrier strike group is not a single ship, but a network of ships with interlocking fields of fire and mutually supporting sensor coverage. They designed the operation specifically to stress that network by attacking it from directions that cannot all be covered simultaneously by any finite number of escort vessels. There is one thing the planners did not adequately account for. Actually, there are several things, but the first and most foundational is this. The drone boats have been in the water for between 33 and 57 minutes, depending on which launch position launched them. And for the entire time they have been in the water, USS Carl Vinson's strike group has known they were there. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye that has been on station 90 miles south of the carrier since 9:30 p.m. detected the first dow's drone deployment at 10:54 p.m., 1 minute after the first 12 drones entered the water. The AN/APY-9 radar, rotating at altitude, painted the Dow clearly, and then, as the small, low-profile drone boats spread out from the deployment point, began building tracks on the individual vehicles. A 4-meter fiberglass hull at 35 knots is a detectable radar contact. Not a large one, not an easy one at long range against the clutter of ocean surface returns. But the AN/APY-9 is specifically optimized to detect exactly this kind of small, fast, low-signature surface contact, and the Hawkeye crew had the first drone tracks established by 11:01 p.m. When the second dhow deployed at 11:02 p.m., the crew was already watching. When the coastal facility launched at 11:14 p.m., they had 23 tracks already built and were adding 8 more. The complete tactical picture, 31 drone boats, 3 approach vectors, projected convergence time and position, was transmitted to Carl Vinson's CIC via data link at 11:19 p.m. The strike group commander, a vice admiral who had been in the CIC since 10:45 p.m., based on an intelligence advisory that IRGCN activity indicators had spiked in the previous 6 hours, looked at the picture. He looked at it for a moment that his staff described as lasting approximately 8 seconds. Then he made his first decision. General quarters. All ships. The strike group went to battle stations in the disciplined, practiced silence of a formation that has drilled this sequence until it requires no conscious coordination. Every ship, every watch station, every system. In the CIC aboard Carl Vinson, the combat team was fully manned within 4 minutes. The tactical picture, 31 drone boats on the display, each with its track, its projected CPA, its estimated time to engagement range, was distributed to every ship in the formation simultaneously through Link 16. The strike group commander's second decision was the engagement architecture. 31 targets, 3 approach vectors, multiple escort vessels with different weapons and different sector assignments. He needed the geometry to work, and working geometry in a multi-ship, multi-threat engagement requires pre-coordination that happens before the first weapon fires. Because once weapons are in the air, the electromagnetic environment becomes complex, and command authority over engagement sequencing can blur in ways that produce duplication of effort and gaps simultaneously. He assigned sectors. USS Princeton CG-59, the Ticonderoga cruiser operating 12 miles to the north, owned the northern threat axis, the 8 drones coming from the JASC facility. Princeton's Mark 38 25mm chain guns and her rolling airframe missiles were the primary weapons for this sector. Her Aegis system would provide radar coverage and fire control solutions, but the SM-2 was not the right weapon for a 4-meter surface drone. Too expensive, wrong engagement geometry, designed for airborne targets. The Mark 38 and RAM were the right tools. USS Gridley DDG-101, operating 18 miles to the southeast, owned the southeastern threat axis, the 11 drones from the second DO. Same weapon mix. USS Chunghoon DDG-93, 15 miles to the southwest, owned the southwestern axis, the 12 drones from the first DO. And Carl Vinson herself, with her own defensive systems, owned the inner defense zone. Anything that got through the escort screen before 3 nautical miles from the carrier would be engaged by the carrier's own Phalanx mounts and ram launchers. The MH-60R Seahawk launched from Princeton at 11:31 p.m. Not for anti-submarine work tonight, for surface warfare. The Seahawk carried its Hellfire missiles and its M240 door gun, and its crew had been briefed on the drone threat picture before liftoff. At 200 feet altitude, flying ahead of the strike group toward the southwestern threat axis, the helicopter's FLIR system began painting the incoming drone boats at a range of 22 miles. In the thermal image, each Toofan was visible as a bright white heat source, the diesel engine running at high power, the exhaust plume trailing behind each vehicle. 31 individual heat sources, organized in loose clusters corresponding to their 3 launch origins, all converging on the carrier's position. The sensor operator counted them. 31. Exactly as the E-2D had reported. The first Seahawk Hellfire launched at 11:34 p.m. at a drone boat 14 miles southwest of the carrier. The AGM-114 Hellfire is not designed for surface drone engagement. It is an anti-armor weapon adapted for a maritime context, but its laser guidance is precise, and its warhead is more than adequate for a 4-meter fiberglass hull. The first drone detonated in a brief orange flash that the FLIR recorded clearly. The second Hellfire launched 40 seconds later. The third, 35 seconds after that. The Seahawk's crew worked methodically, engaging the southwestern cluster from the outside in, prioritizing the fastest closing drones first. At 11:38 p.m., USS Chung-hoon's Mark 3825 mm chain guns opened on the southwestern cluster at a range of 6 nautical miles. The Mark 38 fires a 25 mm high explosive round at 180 rounds per minute in the naval mount configuration. Against a 4-meter fiberglass drone boat moving at 35 knots, a 3-second burst, approximately 9 rounds, is sufficient to destroy the target. The gun mount slewed continuously, engaging one drone, then the next, then the next. The gunfire was visible from the carrier's bridge as a series of brief, bright muzzle flashes on the southwestern horizon, each followed by a small, distant explosion as another Toofan ceased to exist. On the southeastern axis, USS Gridley was engaging with a combination of Mark 38 gunfire and rolling airframe missiles. The RAM has an engagement range of approximately 9 kilometers against surface targets, longer reach than the Mark 38, which let Gridley begin attriting the southeastern cluster before the drones reached gun range. RAM launch sequences are fast. The system can fire multiple missiles in rapid succession, and the fire control system autonomously manages the engagement geometry. By 11:41 p.m., Gridley had fired 7 rams and reported 6 confirmed kills on the southeastern threat axis. Her Mark 38 mounts engaged the remaining drones as they closed to gun range. On the northern axis, USS Princeton was dealing with the 8 drones from the JASC facility. This was the most complex engagement geometrically, because the northern axis approached across the shallower angle sector between 2 of Carl Vinson's escort vessels, requiring Princeton's fire control to deconflict her engagements with potential firing solutions from the carrier herself. The pre-coordinated sector assignments eliminated most of the deconfliction problem. Princeton owned the sector and fired within it, and the other ships held their fire until the northern cluster crossed into their assigned zones. Princeton fired 5 rams and engaged 3 remaining drones with Mark 38 gunfire. By 11:43 p.m., the northern axis was clear, but 4 drones had gotten through. Not through failures of skill or equipment, through the mathematics of multiple simultaneous engagements and the finite response time of any weapon system. 4 Toofan drone boats, taking advantage of the engagement timeline compression created by 31 simultaneous targets, had exploited a 40-second window between Chung-hoon sector engagement and the handoff to the inner defense zone. They were at 4 nautical miles from Carl Vinson, approaching at 35 knots, and they were going to arrive at the carrier's hull in approximately 6 minutes and 51 seconds. Carl Vinson's own defensive systems engaged at 11:44 p.m. Her two Phalanx CIWS mounts, one forward, one aft, had been slewing and tracking since the engagement began. The Phalanx fire control radar acquires surface targets as well as airborne ones, and the 4 incoming drones were large enough, fast enough, and close enough that the system had unambiguous fire control solutions on all 4 simultaneously. The forward mount engaged the 2 drones approaching from the southwest. The aft mount engaged the 2 approaching from the south-southeast. The Phalanx fires 20mm depleted uranium rounds at 4,500 rounds per minute in the M61A1 configuration. At 4 nautical miles against a 35-knot surface target, the engagement timeline is approximately 4 to 5 minutes. Comfortable time for a system that can deliver its entire ready ammunition load in under 2 minutes if required. The forward mount fired its first burst at 11:44:22 p.m., engaging the leading southwestern drone at a range of 3.8 nautical miles. The burst was 1.8 seconds, approximately 135 rounds. The drone detonated at 11:44:24 p.m., its 40-kilogram warhead contributing to the explosion, but in open water 3.8 nautical miles from the carrier's hull. The second southwestern drone, 200 meters behind the first, was engaged 31 seconds later and destroyed at 3.4 nautical miles. The aft mount destroyed the first southeastern drone at 11:44:51 p.m. at 3.6 nautical miles. The fourth and final drone, the last surviving Toofan out of 31 launched, was destroyed at 11:45:17 p.m. at a range of 2.9 nautical miles from Carl Vinson's hull. The warhead detonated in open water. The explosion raised a column of water approximately 15 meters high that the carrier's bridge watch could see clearly against the dark sky. Then it subsided. The sea closed over it. And that was the end of the IRGCN's most ambitious surface drone attack operation. 31 drones, 0 hits. In the CIC, the strike group commander reviewed the engagement summary as it was compiled by the watch team. Engagement timeline, 10:54 p.m. First contact to 11:45 p.m. Final kill. 51 minutes from the Hawkeye's initial detection of the first deployment to the last Phalanx round. Weapons expended, 3 Hellfire missiles from the Seahawk, 7 RAM from Gridley, 5 RAM from Princeton, approximately 1,200 Mark 38 rounds across 3 ships, and approximately 800 Phalanx rounds from Carl Vinson's own mounts. Total cost of American ordnance expended, approximately $8.4 million. Total cost of 31 IRGCN drone boats, approximately $930,000. The math was uncomfortable in the specific direction that surface drone warfare always makes it uncomfortable for the defender. But the uncomfortable math was, in this engagement, beside the point, because the 31 drones had achieved 0 of their intended effect. Not partial effect, not degraded effect. 0. Carl Vinson had not been touched. No crew member had been harmed. No system had been damaged. The carrier's flight operations had been interrupted for 22 minutes during the engagement and had resumed at 12:07 a.m. when the air boss confirmed the surface threat was clear. Two FA-18Fs that had been holding in the Marshall stack during the engagement landed aboard without incident. The next launch cycle went up at 12:30 a.m., exactly as scheduled. The IRGCN's drone boat operation had been detected 51 minutes before the last drone was destroyed, tracked continuously from the moment of deployment, engaged at multiple ranges by multiple weapon systems in a pre-coordinated sector architecture, and defeated without a single weapon reaching its target. The multi-axis, simultaneous convergence geometry that the planners had designed to overwhelm the defensive system's engagement capacity had not overwhelmed it, because the defensive system's capacity, the combination of E-2D early warning, Seahawk forward engagement, escort ship sector weapons, and carrier inner defense, had been matched to the threat during the 19-day intelligence lead time that preceded the operation. The Toofan drone boat is a real capability. It is cheap, scalable, and difficult to defend against in the way that all asymmetric threats are difficult to defend against, by virtue of the favorable cost-exchange ratio it imposes on the defender. The IRGCN will not stop developing it. They will iterate. They will add electronic countermeasures. They will experiment with acoustic homing and RF homing to reduce GPS dependence. They will study the engagement record of tonight's operation to whatever extent their post-event intelligence collection allows, and they will modify their tactics to address the gaps that tonight revealed. But tonight, their 31 drones found a defensive architecture that had 51 minutes of warning, a fully coordinated sector engagement plan, and weapon systems positioned and ready at every range band from 22 miles to 2.9 miles. They found an E-2D that sees small, fast surface targets. They found a Seahawk crew that fires Hellfire missiles at surface drones with the same professional competence it applies to every other mission. They found Mark 38 gunners who engage targets methodically, from the outside in, without rushing. They found Phalanx mounts that do not miss at 3 miles. And they found a strike group commander who went to general quarters based on an intelligence spike 6 hours before the first drone entered the water. Because in this business, the difference between winning and losing is almost always decided not at the moment of contact, but in the hours and days of preparation that precede it. 31 drones, 51 minutes, 0 hits. The Arabian Sea is not a testing range for IRGCN weapons development. It is the operating environment of the United States Navy. And the United States Navy was ready. Bye for now.